It was a shock when Stephanie decided to accept a job offer in a different state without consulting me. She made the decision impulsively, influenced heavily by her friends who seemed more focused on the financial benefits than on the impact it would have on our family. I tried to understand her excitement about the new opportunity, but it felt like a betrayal. I thought we were in this together, and yet she made such a monumental choice without even talking to me first. At the time, I was already struggling with the stress of my father's sudden diagnosis of stage 3 leukemia. I had to step in and support both him and my mother through this incredibly difficult time. Their lives were turned upside down, and I felt like the weight of their world was on my shoulders. I tried to manage everything, but it wasn't easy. Stephanie knew how serious things were with my father's health, but her decision to move away didn't seem to acknowledge what I was going through. She initially promised to stay for the sake of the family, but the pressure kept building. Eventually, she started pushing for the idea of me relocating to be with her for her career. The dynamic of our relationship shifted dramatically. What started as calm discussions turned into heated arguments. We couldn't see eye to eye, and I found myself growing more and more resentful. I wanted to be there for my family, but she wanted me to follow her, as though her career and ambitions were more important than everything else. When she finally moved out, it was as if everything was falling apart. We tried to make our long-distance marriage work, where she would visit every other weekend, but it only made things worse. I was already dealing with the emotional strain of my father's illness and the fact that our marriage was fraying. Stephanie seemed more focused on her new life, and the weekends we spent together didn't help rebuild the distance between us. It only magnified the cracks that were already there. Once she settled into her new job, things took a turn for the worse. She became involved with friends who had a very transactional view of relationships. They prioritized career and success over any emotional bonds, which alarmed me. I was starting to worry about what kind of environment she was surrounding herself with. It seemed like she was changing, and not in the ways I'd hoped for. My fears grew as I realized the influence her friends were having on her decisions, and I couldn't help but feel like I was losing her. The divorce itself was surprisingly smooth, almost too smooth. We agreed on joint custody of the twins, and the process was over before I knew it. But explaining everything to our children was the hardest part. They were confused and upset. They couldn't understand why their mother was no longer living with us, and I had to navigate the painful task of breaking their hearts. It felt like everything had fallen apart, and there was no way to make it right. Months after the divorce, Stephanie reached out to me. She admitted she regretted her decisions and acknowledged that the new job and lifestyle she had chased hadn't given her the happiness she thought it would. It was strange hearing her admit that, especially since I had felt like she was so determined to make it work. She told me how she had made a mistake and that she wished she could go back and change things. During our conversation, Stephanie opened up more about her feelings and what had led her to where she was. She confessed that she had been looking for fulfillment in all the wrong places. She wasn't seeking reconciliation, but she did say she wanted to move back closer to the children. It was clear that she wasn't ready to repair our marriage, but it was a step forward for her. She was taking responsibility for her actions, and that was something I hadn't expected to hear from her. We had an honest conversation about everything, and I could sense a deep shift in her. She apologized for everything, her decisions, her mistakes, and the way she had hurt me. It wasn't easy to hear, but it was something I needed. She promised to do better as a mother and to be there for the kids. It wasn't about us anymore, but about what was best for them. For the first time in a long while, I felt like there was some sense of closure. It wasn't the kind of closure I had envisioned, but it was something. I realized that our relationship might never be the same, but I needed to focus on co-parenting. The kids were the priority now, and I knew I couldn't let my feelings get in the way of what was best for them. Still, a part of me wondered if there was a chance to rebuild what we had. But that was something I wasn't sure about, and I couldn't dwell on it. I had to move forward, even if I wasn't entirely sure what that looked like yet. As time went on, I focused on the daily challenges of co-parenting with Stephanie. It wasn't easy. The kids were still adjusting to the idea of their mother being gone, and I found myself stepping up in ways I hadn't anticipated. I took on more responsibility, trying to balance their needs with my own emotional well-being. Stephanie's attempts to reconnect with them were slow and, at times, awkward. She wanted to make amends, but I could see that the damage ran deeper than she realized. In the months after our conversation, Stephanie began spending more time with the children. I saw her trying, really trying, to be a better mom. There were moments when I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to rebuild some form of relationship for their sake. But even though I saw changes in her, the trust we once had was gone. I couldn't forget the way she had left, the decisions she made without consulting me, and how I had been left to navigate an incredibly difficult situation on my own. There were moments when we'd talk, and I'd hear the regret in her voice, but it wasn't enough to erase the past. We both had our wounds. I'd been hurt by her abandonment, and she had been hurt by the realization that chasing after a career at the cost of everything else didn't bring the happiness she expected. In many ways, it felt like we were both searching for something that had already slipped away. Still, I wasn't sure if that was something we could fix. I also had my own journey of reflection. I spent months processing everything. What went wrong, where we went wrong, and what I wanted moving forward. I realized that I wasn't just angry at her for leaving. I was angry at myself for not standing up for my own needs sooner. I had allowed my feelings to be pushed aside while trying to please everyone else. And now, with the divorce final, I had the chance to rebuild my life, not just for myself, but for our children as well. Stephanie had her own path to follow. She made it clear that she didn't want to rush anything, especially not reconciliation. She had learned a hard lesson, and I think she understood that some things couldn't be fixed easily, no matter how much we wanted them to be. Her commitment to being a better mother gave me hope, but it also made me realize that we both needed to heal individually before any kind of relationship could be rebuilt. We continued our lives in separate directions, focused on our children and finding our individual happiness. I focused on being the father they needed, putting aside any lingering resentment for the sake of their well-being. The kids were doing better, and that was all that mattered. I found peace in knowing that I was giving them stability, something I hadn't been able to provide when everything first fell apart. Stephanie made the decision to stay closer to the children, moving back to a town nearby. I could see the relief in the kids' faces when she was around more often. Though we didn't try to rekindle anything romantic, the bond between us as co-parents slowly began to take shape. There were still challenges, moments of tension and awkwardness, but there was also a new understanding between us. We both had our mistakes, and we both had to take responsibility for the parts we played in the breakdown of our marriage. But the most important thing was that we were trying to be better for ourselves and for our children. Over time, the healing process began. It wasn't quick, and it wasn't easy. There were still days when I thought about what could have been, and I had moments of regret. But those thoughts no longer consumed me. I had learned to move forward. I focused on the lessons learned, the growth I had undergone, and the hope that, even if things weren't perfect, they could still be okay. For Stephanie and me, the future wasn't about reconciling our past. It was about learning to coexist in a way that allowed us to be good parents and respectful ex-partners. We both had our own journeys to follow, and I realized that while I might never fully understand her decisions, I couldn't hold on to anger anymore. We both had our own paths to walk, and our children needed us to show them how to navigate life's toughest challenges with grace and understanding. As time went on, I found a quiet strength in knowing that despite everything, I had come out of this with my dignity intact. It wasn't the life I had imagined, and it wasn't the outcome I had hoped for, but it was my life now. And with it, I had learned that sometimes the greatest lessons come from the hardest experiences. We all make mistakes. We all have regrets. But we also have the ability to learn from them and move forward. In the end, Stephanie and I both found our way forward, each in our own way, learning to put the past behind us, while working together to give our children the stable, loving environment they deserved. And that, for now, was enough.